Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Design Miami. Thank you for joining us today. We will be discussing the new cultural initiative and artistic models in the modern golden age. Big thank you for being here today. Thank you for Maya, Christina, Deidre for inviting us. I'm very thankful to be amongst you all. So what are we going to talk about? We're going to respond to the theme of this year's edition of Art Basel, and we'll be touching on the themes of patronage, technology, and sustainability. The panelists here today will have multifaceted discussion about the ways in which public art is working with the convention of the past. My name is Anne-Laure Pingreoun. I'm the curator and founder of Alter Projects. We're a placemaking curatorial practice based in London, and I'll be moderating today's session. It's actually a subject that is very dear to my heart and at the core of my practice, so I'm very super excited again to be here. To give you some context, throughout history, the Golden Age is witnessed by societies around the world have demonstrated one major commonality. They break with the artistic, societal, and scientific norms of the past. Today, as the world collectively heals from the pandemic, it's no different. NFTs, public installations, and communal projects are giving rise to a new model for artistic integration, one in which artists, curators, designers, commissioners can work more collaboratively together and more responsibly as well. The panelists will therefore discuss the world of opportunities this allows for and the challenges that lies ahead as the art industry moves into this new golden age. For the people who know me, they will know I like to walk the talk, so please, do not hesitate to message us, to come and talk to us afterwards. We're here to exchange with you guys, find solutions, and collaborate together. So let's start this session. Like I said, I'm super grateful. There's so many, discussion ahead and so many subjects we're going to discuss together. All of these beautiful panels have worked together on some groundbreaking projects all over the world. You'll see some of them in the backgrounds throughout this session. All of them try to push boundaries in every way they could in order to create new creative models. So we have, at the end, the amazing Saff Williams, Curatorial Director for Brookfield Properties, Europe Real Estate Group. Then we have John Gilsenan, CEO for Westgreen Construction Company. And then finally, Yuri Suzuki, sound artist, experience designer, and electronic musician. So we'll start with a quick intro by each of them, but we thought that was quite an interesting opportunity for us to brainstorm together. Again, all of them have a completely different background, and we thought that'd be interesting to have different perspective here. Instead of doing the usual biography and people talking about their work in a kind of usual way, we thought it'd be interesting for them to actually share some of their projects and some of their POVs. So we're going to start with one question that all of them will answer, and it's, at what point did you realize the rise of these new artistic models, and how has this manifested in your life of work or within your industry? Shall we start with Saff?
Hi, that's loud. I'm Saff. I'm the Curatorial Director for Brookfield Properties. And we look after, we run and manage developments for Brookfield Asset Management. And I sort of work on art strategy across Europe, so primarily in London and Berlin. And I think for me, I studied art history, I always worked in galleries, I worked for Biennale. I never ever imagined that I would end up working for a property development group. And that was the moment for me that I realized, models were changing. I've worked in art fairs, I've worked in artist-run initiatives, commercial galleries. But I think when I got to Brookfield, I started to realize that there was all these unexplored spaces that we could kind of reinterpret and create pop-up art exhibitions, that I had access to, huge audiences, 6,000 per building, plus neighbors, plus people incidentally walking through them. and access to funds. So it was kind of, for me, expansive in my thinking in terms of like how we could show and commission artist projects in unexpected ways. And for me, it's been really exciting. I started with them as freelance for 2 years, and now I've been with them sort of, 3 going into 4 years. So it's evolving, and our buildings and our spaces change. And, we're both outside in the public domain, like with plazas and piazzas, and also inside in reception spaces. So, for each space we have different characters of what kind of exhibition or cultural collaborators or other curators we'd work with. And that was, I guess, a moment of revision for me, thinking that it's not just in this sort of white cube space, like what is that space? Could that be a reception? Could that be outside in the public? So yeah, that's me.
Thank you. Yeah, and we'll go more into that after on like the role actually the property developers are playing right now when it comes to art and design. So thank you. Yuri, do you want to go next?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is Yuri. So like my kind of practice has been like kind of very like following what's happened to like any offer and so on. Like I studied used to be industrial design first, and fundamentally I have fascination for sound and music in a way. And then when I graduate, people like there's a lot of commission work is based on more about the art field, like a museum and a gallery piece. And then sometimes some design context as well. So in the beginning, it's kind of just like doing whatever in front of me and just digest it. And then I think things happen. I'm doing a lot of like public art installation this 7 years. And I think first moment I have got into that project is like commercial work from High Museum Art in Atlanta. They asked me to designing sort of like public art sculpture. That's a sort of starting point into public art project. And since then, like my project scale became more bigger. So kind of almost like really bizarre in the way, like artists try to make more of a smaller piece and put in represent in the gallery. But my situation is I don't have any gallery, and I just have got really larger commission all the time. So I think that's kind of a way I'm developing like my practice at the moment. Does it answer the question?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Same thing. We'll dig into that after. I think it's going to be interesting to see who commissions you, and then what is the effect of that in terms of your creation and so on. Finally, John.
Yeah, I'm the unusual guy in the room, I think, here.
You're not.
Hello, everybody. Unlike the rest of the panel here, I'm not from an art background. I'm a builder. I started my career building houses and commercial centres and construction, a long way away from the art market. But through good fortune, I'd like to say it was something to do with a clever business strategy. It wasn't. It was just through recommendation that we first were asked to help with a large sculpture. And it needed some engineering and heavy lifting construction activities. So we thought that was quite interesting, something different. And after that, a gallery approached us. They were putting on a big exhibition which required remodeling the gallery space. And it was quite a big deal. And they were quite apprehensive about it. The stakes were high. And so for me, it was another construction project, but it introduced me to the art market. And through good fortune, we've subsequently met curators, commissioning galleries. And I think if there's a shift and a trend that I've witnessed post-pandemic is from what's been fortuitously a series of repeat commissions with galleries, and artists as well, actually, has been a shift towards more pavilions and public art spaces. I'm not sure if that's only to do with our getting more notoriety or recognition in the art market, or whether or not there is more of a push for experiences in outside the gallery, conventional gallery space, which leads, I think, to these other environments where art can be exhibited and enjoyed, which I think we're going to cover a little bit more on later. So my journey has been conventional in terms of helping artists and galleries in their normal spaces, now shifting, I think, to other spaces where art is exhibited, and how the people collaborate and come together, and who galleries and artists will reach out to. They're thinking a bit more outside their normal networks, I think, to reach specialisms and people who can bring what's required to the table to deliver something exemplary.
Yeah, thank you, John. Yeah, and I think it's also, we'll again talk about that after, but your contribution, like in terms of giving back to the industry, because you're also amazing in terms of sponsoring a lot of design work, so we'll look into that. Saff, I think we're going to do a few individual questions to kind of go more into what you're doing and so on, but the first one would be, why have property developers taken continued interest in terms of art and design?
Well, I can't speak for all property developers.
At least for Brookfield.
But it's certainly an increasing trend, particularly in London, you see it. I mean, Brookfield has been investing in the arts heavily as part of their kind of like bedding into a neighbourhood for over 30 years, since 1988. But I think the continued interest is really that, like, I mean, we're aware that we have a lot of property, particularly in London and in Berlin. And in order for that to feel like a neighbourhood or to engage with anyone, it needs to speak sort of truthfully to the community. So often that is commissioning local artists and or leaning on the expertise of other cultural institutions that are nearby that know the neighbours. So, you know, we've worked a lot with the Barbican in London, the London Symphony Orchestra, the Crafts Council, all of these kind of like neighbouring institutions that are tapped into cultural audiences already. And I think, I guess from a sort of business perspective, like it is an edge for us at Brookfield that when somebody moves into one of our buildings, that there's a kind of, we call it like, you know, it's like a tenant experience. And I think this term placemaking is a slightly sort of outdated word now, but it still holds fast in the sense that you're trying to create something of, you know, the space inside and outside. And they're kind of, you know, accidental pop-ups in a way, because I think when you come to work, you're not necessarily expecting to see an exhibition that I've put up in the space, but I like that because I think it's expansive for like the tenants because they get something else out of coming into work.
Absolutely.
And I think, like, as John said, there has been a real shift, like, post-pandemic. Like, we're obviously trying to get people to come back into the office. And there's a lot you can get from working at home, but some of the things that you can get from the office are not just double screens and, you know, being with your colleagues face-to-face and not having 50 emails. That might also be doing a yoga session or a run club,
yeah,
or sitting on, you know, an Emily Forgot, like, sculptural installation whilst you're having lunch and having that moment together and talking, you know, having a meeting outside in the sun. I think people's general expectation is for more experience now, whether it's restaurant experiential or it's from the office experiential, and art is like crucial for that. So yeah.
And I think that leads quite nicely to the second one, which, what do you think, you know, these projects have in terms of impact to these communities, whether it's residential or business and so on? Like you said, like it's just, it changes, I think, I mean, from also what we've done and also doing together right now, but it's interesting to know that it has a longer impact than just, you know, and it's that kind of consistency that you're building in terms of creating a cultural program that I think you guys are really, really interesting in how you're handling things. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think even in the time that I've been with them, the expectation is more now for art. So if we have a breather in between a pop-up exhibition and then I put back whatever art was there, you know, from 10 years ago, tenants write in and say, when is the next exhibition?
Yeah.
And I think, like, we had last year a show with Anna Ray. We have a Brookfield Properties Craft Award, which is now turned into one of the seminal craft awards, like, in the UK. And people said, wow, seeing that work was really, like, joyful and uplifting in a time that was quite hectic going into work. I mean, that's kind of the best example. But I always say to my colleagues, even if someone hates what we put in the reception, I still win, because if you're in the lift bitching about what's, you know, what you think you see downstairs, that's fine as long as you're making a connection with someone else, getting something else
Absolutely.
out of work, feeling, you know, talking about art, then I'm happy. Like whether it's, obviously you can't make everybody happy, but I would like people to get more out of the work environment around discussions,
Yeah.
you know. And I think from an artist perspective, you know, we've been really keen to make sure artists are paid for their ideas before we go into artist contracts, that they are paid properly and remunerated for their work that's comparable to anything, if not more, than some other trails that happen. And I think I'm literally having Slade graduates, etc., contacting me now saying, have you got spare retail space? I want to commission, like I want to curate this show and I've got all these grads, and like that's super exciting that I'm
100%.
receiving those emails now, because I think, wow, like I've got students, like amazing emerging artists contacting us wanting to show in the city of London or in you know, Potsdam, where maybe that wasn't the first place that they would think to show.
Yeah, and then to that point, like, how do you make sure that you're, you know, you're creating some sort of sustainability in terms of how the work, like what happens to the work afterwards, like in terms of repurposed, and do you tour arts, like what happens to it?
Sort of talking on the topic of this and doing away with old models, I'm not interested anymore, like in the programming of, and the team isn't interested in necessarily buying permanent artwork, particularly sculptural permanent artwork, because it's limiting. And at this point, I'm much more interested in commissioning big pieces of work, particularly at 100 Bishopsgate. The cost of the work is basically paid for in the construction and the artist's fee, but at the end, and as per contract, that work is then owned by the artist. And I think that's important because, one, it's not very interesting to just go into necessarily a corporate collection where it's dusty and unseen. And also from the artist's perspective, I would hope, and we did a big project with Sophie Smallhorn, the London artist. We worked together, great outcome of creating beautiful sculptural pieces for 100 Bishopsgate. And then my team, like in the US, there are other curators said, we love that project, we want to show it in New York. Is it ours? And I said, no, it's owned by the artist. So you need to contact Sophie, and I connected them. And then Sophie got a new artist fee and a new opportunity to show it. And it's now going to Denver and Toronto. So at each time, one, the work isn't being scrapped, it's sort of being re-seen and toured. And also the artist has an opportunity to show in new markets and as they rightly should, make new fees.
Yeah, and get paid for it, which is also great.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thanks, Saff. Yuri, do you want to go next? I think, again, like from your introduction, it's interesting to see, like, has your creative process different in any ways right now, based on what you said at the beginning?
Yeah, I think it's more about team construction things. Yeah. In terms of development, like for the project, it's very like, you know, quite kind of a collaborative way, like I was working anyway, and in terms of team and so fabricate and so on. And also, yeah, coming to the digesting brief, like what kind of project in terms of public art project is always not about subjective view, more about objective view in a way, I think, because it must work for community. So I have to think of a scenario, what's going to be useful on the space and so on. And a good conversation with you before was, you know, kind of public art is like not necessary to be that bronze kind of statue. Like it should be something interactive or something work out for the community or space, I think. So that's kind of process and yeah, like change to think about. Is it kind of answer the question? Like, sorry.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
And that leads again to the second one, which is, has your audience changed? Because I think, like you said, there's a big jump between creating an artwork for an institution and suddenly creating artwork in public space. So you don't, like, obviously that's a very captive audience when you are in a museum, but you have to kind of appeal to everyone once you're outside. So how do you think that has changed? Do you, and has that affected your work as well, like in terms of creative output, do you think?
I think it's forgot to mention about my background also. I'm partner at a company called Pentagram, like quite larger scale design consultancy firm as well. And then what I design for in consultancy work is very large audience for sometimes corporation identity music I sometimes do. And also I worked for Disney as well, kind of basically Disneyland development kind of a consultancy kind of work I did as well. So it's like, I used to be like very kind of niche in the way, like try to designing probably myself in the beginning. Then thinking about public art is more about people surrounding that area. And if you think about scale like Disney, it's much more larger audience. So I think thinking about targeting and also people targeting designs really quite wider, I feel like.
Yeah, and then, yeah, again, the whole like health and safety as well is another key point.
That's something quite depressive part, but I had to deal with it.
Thanks, Yuri. John, I think again, your background is incredible because, like you said, it's coming from a complete, like the opposite of, you haven't kind of bathed into the art and design in terms of upbringing and so on. But I think you have a true passion for art and design. And what was your interest in you taking on more that role, which is again not very common in your industry?
Well, I think, through good luck, we were introduced to the art market. I grew up in a creative environment. I suppose my father was a joiner, so I spent my time in workshops and seeing things being made and built. So I always had that interest. So it was inevitable I was going to end up building something. And first of all, helping with our first sculptural project was for Anthony Gormley at Margate, building a 25-metre tall sculpture that was burnt. That was quite interesting and something different for the carpenters to engage with. And then our first introduction to the art market thereafter was in 2010 when a project manager introduced me to go to King's Cross and go to a gallery where they were going to do a remodelling. So for me it was a fit-out type of regular petitions, I thought. That's all it would be. So I turned up at Gagosian Gallery to see the managing director, Gary Waterston, who's described to me a Picasso exhibition they were putting on. I'd heard of Picasso, I hadn't heard of Gagosian or any significance. That was the first time I'd been to a private gallery in my life. And there was a group show on at the time, Crash, and there was a series of different artists, and I was just looking around at this stuff thinking, what's this all about? This is a crazy world. And they're going to pay me as well to do this work. It was curated by Annabelle Seldorf, all names that maybe are familiar to you now, and they certainly weren't to me. And we worked closely together to put on what was a very exacting show with high-value works, with curators and conservators crawling all over every detail, from the glue that was used to the air conditioning systems and so on. And so it was a real new world for me, and my team and I enjoyed that, and the collaboration with, as I said, Gary Waterston at Gagosian was pivotal to that, and his drive for perfection and the attention to detail we embraced, and I enjoyed that creativity and doing things a little bit differently than just, in inverted commas, putting another swimming pool under a banker's house in Holland Park, which we are very happy to do as well, but it was just something different. Those projects take years to evolve, lots of legislation, and we found the art market to be much more dynamic and fast-moving, but high value, high stakes in some instances. So that was our first show, and that went very well and got some good press and so on, and Gary and Gagosian seemed happy with us, and Annabelle too. And again, through good fortune, the next show was a James Turrell installation, a major installation, actually. I think it's on the screen. Hadn't heard of James Turrell, but we worked with him in his studio, and he was sketching out ideas on napkins and very just descriptive and he commissioned some new works, or Gagosian commissioned James for some new series of works where we fabricated perceptual cell piece and these other works. And that was really interesting, getting into the detail, being involved early on and involving my team of carpenters and joiners and other tradesmen, plasterers and so on to achieve, for James's work, has to be a perfect finish, razor sharp, perfect finish. That show went well, and James spoke well of us, and that led to future commissions with the Pace Gallery. Were doing something with Garage in Moscow, so we went to Moscow. A builder gets to go to Moscow. That's a bit of an interesting journey, all in a very short period of time, and we've since been to LACMA and Canberra, National Gallery of Australia, and Venice. And so this crazy world of me being introduced to the art market has brought me around the world and meeting artists and curators and really interesting people. So,
And galleries as well, yeah.
and my team now, if I mention a big house wherever in London, they're very happy to do it, and it's often with contemporary designers and challenges as well. But the art projects are fast, furious, and they're much more public. They're less constrained by NDAs and so on, people's private homes, and so they can engage much more with them. So that's been
and take their families there as well.
Yeah, I've witnessed an incredible uptake in interest amongst my team in contemporary, and me, after a lot of Googling and a couple of books read.
You're the expert now.
Kind of, I won't say I'm an authority, but I know more than I did when I first crossed the threshold at Gagosian that time and nearly tripped over the artwork.
Well,
I offered to rip out some stuff and said, well, that will go in the skip, we'll clear that out of the way. And they said, no, our technicians will be deinstalling that work. So.
Second question, how is this line of work impacting actually communities differently, you think?
Well, I think, we touched on the big lockdown that we've all witnessed, and I think that forced us all to rethink how we worked and engaged with each other. And what I've witnessed is probably more interest in interactions. There's only so much Zooming you can do, or on a personal level, that being at home, Uber Eats and Netflix and so on gives you so much. And the art market moved and was very fast to adapt to virtual galleries and so on, I think. But that doesn't and can't replace engagement in the workplace. As employers, people, and we all need to work with each other, I think, and that will be why offices are needed. And when you go to the office or you go through life, you need personal interaction, and I think that's where we're seeing more a shift towards engagement with each other, but also demanding more from our engagements. And so that's leading to more interactive artwork, and Terrell's a great example of that, but also some pavilions we're being involved with. So.
Yeah. And again, that leads, I think, to the last one that says, what are the challenges involved in bringing all of these actors together? And I'd love for you to talk about your work during the London Design Festival.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think, again, it's really interesting to have you basically sponsoring central London when it comes to design, so for things to happen. So yeah. So
I think the big sponsors. I think the big sponsors sitting to my left. But we the challenges are often bringing carpenters and joiners and tradespeople into an environment which is traditionally foreign. They're not familiar with to the work. It can be intimidating, either through their lack of exposure to it, or how the art market or those galleries have presented themselves in the past. It's not always that open and welcoming, let's say. And they're busy, and their wives and partners and husbands are all busy, maybe just running a family, and don't have time to immerse themselves in art. And I think it's sometimes perceived as a privilege to be able to spend time in or around art, because it takes time and bandwidth which perhaps other people don't invest in. But I've witnessed my teams first of all be quite cynical and skeptical about artwork, as I suppose I was a little bit at the beginning, and then begin to do a little bit of research, and you become interested in it. And now if I go to work, my tattooed scaffolders or the burly builders will be telling me about, oh, have you seen that exhibition at the Tate recently? I brought the kids there. Or they enjoy the fact that they can bring their families to show them work that they've built. They've actually been played a part in, even if it's a wall. We build these environments where some amazing work is exhibited and experienced. So they're the challenges, and the barriers are I think quite easy to break down, because if you can get a builder to
For sure.
to engage and start following artists on Instagram, I think you're quite a way there.
And actually, mine's like the opposite way. So I've got to try and convince artists to go into non-gallery
Yeah,
spaces.
exactly.
So I have like the opposite. So I'm always dealing with builders and people in leasing, and I'm trying to say to artists, this is a really good opportunity. It's temperature controlled, there's lighting, there's security, it's open 24 hours. Like, you know, we can kind of carve out a really amazing space for you.
Yeah.
This piece, well, it's gone now, but we recently did Anton Alvarez. He's a Swedish-Chilean artist that we showed at 100 Bishopsgate in an empty retail space. And I was sort of trying to say to Anton, like, he said, oh yeah, I've got some sculptures I can show. And then as we started to collaborate, he's like, why don't I build the work in a dome in the reception? And we got very excited. We did it in a huge kind of empty retail space next door, but we made it like a theatre set, and it is soon to be a cafe, I guess. But it didn't look like a cafe when Anton was in there, crushing like, you know, clay and using the extruder to make these huge columns.
I think it takes good clients and good people to have the vision to go on that journey. And our experience working with galleries and some artists is that they push our boundaries, and you have to be, because in construction you're typically very conservative, very worried about litigation. It's got to last for 100 years, it's got to be safe. And the art market is completely the opposite, not irresponsible at all, but actually it's got to be fast, furious, innovative, never done before. And when you bring those two skill sets together, there can be a clash. But actually when they start working a little bit more openly, then it's a joyous process, and the results are interesting.
But we're going to have to wrap up, unfortunately. We've talked a lot, and that was great. I think it's super interesting to hear again from all of you guys from complete different backgrounds, and I think you're all pushing boundaries in lots of different ways, whether it's Yuri and through your artwork and mixing all different mediums and through your work in public art, and John, with all, again, the sponsorship that you're doing with Mayfair Design District, or, you know, all the beautiful work you're doing with your team, with artists, and actually spending more time directly being commissioned by artists now. And Saff, with, you know, you being able to create this amazing cultural programming for cities and buildings, and, you know, to inspire people every day and having happier, healthier lives. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for today. And yeah, please do not hesitate to message us, email us if you have any questions. We'd be delighted to answer. Thank you.